Hi guys, this is a recap on season 2, episode 146 of Beyond the Gates. But before we get into the recap, if you've been to this channel or maybe you're new to the content, feel free to leave a comment, and subscribe. So how I like to do my recaps, I will give you a character and then I'll explain what they're doing in the scene. The scenes that I talk about in this video may not be in the exact same order in which they aired in the episode. I like to go from my least favorite or least impactful scene to my most favorite or most impactful scenes. And if I have any comments, theories, or anything like that, I will put those at the end of the video. So without further ado, let me tell you what these characters have been up to. So Joey and Randy, they have this brief moment where they're talking about Heather, and Joey's still trying to figure out what she's doing there. And Randy brings up the fact that, Heather was there, when it comes to the whole impaler situation. Randy still feels like Heather is working for the impaler, but we know now that Heather was actually the impaler, and Joey knows that, but Joey didn't correct him when he said it. And then so Randy, says that he's going to have somebody look into, what Heather's been up to and what she's doing. And so he leaves Joey at the casino. So we have a moment with Martin and Smitty, and they're still talking about, Tyrell, and it picks up from yesterday's episode when they had decorated the house in the Banneker, all of the Banneker stuff, and they talk about how Samantha was able to convince Tyrell to leave the house and go out for drinks, and I guess like some kind of smoothies or something like that. And then they're on their way upstairs, and Kat walks in. She just lets herself in. She brings a gift because in the previous episode, Samantha told Kat about, Tyrell's breakup and how he's still in this funk and everything. And she says that she's going to go, come and show him auntie love. And so she comes, to the house. She brings this gift, and they let her know that Tyrell is not there, and, he left with Samantha, and they wonder, maybe Samantha forgot about, Kat coming, because Kat tells them, that she told Samantha that she was going to be coming by. So then they want to know, like, what is in the bag, what's the gift, and she says that it is, one of the new hottest games out, video games, and Smitty says that, if you're trying to get him out of his room, that's not a good gift. And she says, she just wants to spoil him and everything. She didn't really think about that. And then, Kat and Martin, they go down memory lane, and they talk about how Danny spoiled them when they were going to, out to college, and, she bought them gifts and everything. So, during this moment, Smitty gets an email or a text message where he is, being offered to come onto this crime podcast. And, Kat gets excited about hearing that because we know she loves crime podcasts. And he tells her, the name of the podcast, and she talks about all the cases that they've talked about on the podcast. And then she's trying to explain about, some case that they worked on. And then Shonda comes in, and she's telling, Martin about, his case, and she's giving him a little update. And then they tell her about, Martin doing the podcast, and she tells them that Martin can't do it under any circumstances. And then we get her, explanation of it, because they want to know, why she's saying that he can't do it and all of that. And so she says it's because Martin is in this race, and they can't have any distractions or anything like that to affect Martin's case. And she says that, Smitty may say something that may affect Martin, his campaign. And Smitty says, well, I'm a journalist, I'm media trained. And she says she knows that, but sometimes you get on podcasts and they start off with questions about, certain things, and then they switch it to something else. And she just doesn't want, like, Smitty to be trapped in all of that. So later on, Kat is gone and Shonda is gone, and we get this moment with Smitty and Martin. And Martin tells Smitty that, he knows that he's given up a lot of his career for this campaign. And if he wants to do the podcast, then, whoever is going to have to just deal with it, because he said he can do it. And so Smitty decides not to do it. But it's good to hear that Martin was on board with him, actually going about doing that. Okay, so we have this moment with Haley and Caroline. They're in Bill's office. Haley is bringing this fruit basket for Caroline. She's trying to show that, she's appreciative of what Caroline did for Bill. And Caroline walks in on Haley. And, they have this fake love conversation, as if they're still friends. And Haley tells Caroline, that she, they feel like she can't take care of Bill like, how Danny and all of them do. And Caroline tells Haley, if you want to be seen as someone who can take care of Bill, take him this fruit basket. It's healthy and everything, and do a handwritten note, and then go to the hospital and don't leave his side. And so Haley agrees, and then they do this hug, and they're both, kind of playing each other. They have these looks on their faces where, they're not really feeling each other at this moment. Okay, and then we get this moment, where Danny and Vanessa, they are still at, the country club. And, they've been having this conversation in the previous episode where they're talking about, Danny being at the hospital with Bill and how it's affecting her relationship with Andre and everything. And so Vanessa says that she's waiting on Heather. They're supposed to play tennis. And so Heather finally shows up, and, she's, greeting Danny and everything. And she walks in on the conversation, and she wants to know what's going on. And they kind of, fill her in about Danny's ex not being a good guy, and that, he was sick, and that, she showed up to the hospital, but they have children. That's why, not because, there's something with her new relationship or her new marriage. And then we have this moment where Heather, she has this pamphlet for massages and, the different things that they offer at the country club. And she wants to know if Vanessa is okay with her, skipping out on tennis. She wants to get a massage. And so Vanessa tells her, that's fine. She gave her a free pass for a month, and, so they can play tennis at any time. And so they want to know if Heather has an opinion on Danny's situation and all that. But, we've seen Heather say, I don't have any relationship advice, and, I don't have any children, so I can't speak on that. But she's also intrigued by the information that she's getting from Danny and from Vanessa in this moment. Then she eventually leaves to go get her massage. Vanessa eventually leaves, and we have this moment with Joey and Vanessa. Vanessa shows up to Joey's casino, and she's talking about how great Heather is, and Heather was at the country club with her and Danny, and Joey thinks that she shouldn't be introducing Heather to her friends. And Vanessa says that Heather is really a great person. She's growing on her, and that Danny likes Heather too. And but Joey says that he's never known his sister to be a girl's girl, that there's always some type of motive to her behavior. And Vanessa thinks Joey is still thinking about the young version of Heather. He doesn't know this version of her, and that she's there, maybe to get to know her brother. But Joey is still trying to get Vanessa to, watch out for his sister, and um, just know that she has these motives, and don't try to get too close to her. There's always something when it comes to Heather. And he reminds her that Heather wants to be his partner, and he doesn't feel like she's given up on that goal of connecting with him in that way, and that she should watch her. And so they disagree on that. And then we have this moment with Bill and Andre. So at the end of the last episode, we see Andre walking into Bill's hospital room because, he had that conversation with his uncle Ted, and he tells, Ted told him to talk to Danny and Bill, and just, be a man about it, and, let both of them know how he feels about the situation. So he gets in the room with Bill, and, he says that he understands why Danny had to come and see how Bill was doing and be there for Bill, because she felt like he probably was about to leave, like check out completely, because he's, he kept calling him old. He says that he's been in the hospital so many times that, he understands that, she had to come up here because he can't stay out of the hospital. And so, Andre is telling Bill that, he's had to do so many things, to help Danny try to, get over how he hurt her. And Bill is telling him, I've given Danny so much. We had a great life. I've given her a great life. And Andre reminds him that you hurt her and you left her. And he says that, well, I gave her 2 children. And Andre reminds Bill that he hurt them as well. And Bill, makes this comment about Andre being upset because no matter what he does, he's not, hasn't been able to give, Danny enough for her to keep her mind, off of him. And Andre says that it's sick, for him to even think that way, to want Danny to, be all on him and, not being able to get over him, and that while he's in the hospital, he should have them to check his ego as well. And this whole time that they're going back and forth, Bill's heart rate is, going higher and higher and higher. And so we see Ashley come in, and she's trying to figure out what's going on, the reason why Bill's heart rate is going up this high, and she sees that Andre is in there. And so she's trying to calm Bill down to get his, heart rate back down. And Andre eventually walks out. And then later we get this moment with Ashley and Andre. And Ashley wants to know what's going on with Andre. Is there something going on with him and Danny? And, all of that. And, Andre, he's just still frustrated. And then he ends up leaving. He gets on the elevator and he leaves. And then later, we have this little moment where Danny comes, and she's talking to Ashley briefly, and then Ashley lets her know that Andre had been into Bill's room. And so Danny goes into Bill's room, and she just pretty much tells him to leave Andre alone or whatever. But they're not in there. They don't have like a long conversation before Haley walks in with this fruit basket, and she completely looks over Danny, and she goes to Bill, and she's extra loving and all of that. And Danny makes herself known by speaking up. And then Danny has this moment where she's talking about the fruit basket that Haley brought, and it being old and looks like the grapes are from a week ago and all of that. And then so she eventually leaves the hospital room where Bill is. And there's this moment that I forgot to mention before Danny goes to the hospital, where she's still at the country club, by herself. She's sitting at the table, and she's having all these flashback memories of how great Andre has been to her. And, so it's showing some of their little moments from the past, in those flashbacks. Then we have a moment with Andre and Grayson. So after Andre leaves the hospital, he goes to Uptown and he wants a drink. He's having a day. He's still getting text messages from somebody from his past that won't leave him alone. And then he's had the day with Bill. And so Grayson pours him a drink, and Andre wants the drink, to keep coming. So he gets a tab, and then he gets another text message. After giving Grayson like a brief description of what's been going on with his day, he gets a text message, and it says, that I'm here, turn around, I can see you, pretty much. And so when he turns around, he doesn't see anybody. And then he gets the text says, gotcha. And so he goes and sits at the table. He's still kind of looking around. And then there's a phone conversation that he has with Danny. Danny is still at the hospital. He's at Uptown. And they both don't tell the truth about where they are. So Andre says he's on the way home, and Danny says she's on the way home. They, say that they love each other, and she tells him that she's going to prove it to him, when she gets home and she sees him tonight. And so they both agree, and then they get off the phone. And Andre is still looking at these text messages from this person from the past that, keeps texting him. And so then we have a moment with Grayson and Ashley wants to know how Andre's doing because she sees him at the table. He's, still taking back the drinks and everything. And Grayson gives her a little update on, him not doing well and everything. And she also tells Grayson that, that she used to like Andre. And so that looked like it was new information for Grayson, because I don't feel like he knew that. But it wasn't like, he was upset or anything. He just was like, oh, I didn't know that, without saying that was just the look that he gave. And that was pretty much the gist of this episode. This week has been pretty good when it comes to, how they've been kind of connecting certain dots. And, I like the fact that we've added new little things to it, but we didn't completely, go from Bill being in the hospital and the drama for all of that, and then just jump to, a completely different storyline with different characters that haven't been included in this week's episode. So I'm glad that we didn't do that. I understand bringing Ashley into the mix a little bit this week, because like I said, she was at the beginning of the week when, being in the hospital. So she was a part of that drama. But I understand her being in the mix when it comes to the Andre and Bill's, part of this story too as well. And, but like I said, this week has been great when it comes to the build-up of these storylines. I think this episode was a little bit slower than the other ones, but it still wasn't a bad episode. So all of these episodes so far this week have been a 7 out of 10 or above. And I think that's really great, because we did go through like some moments where some of the episodes where, like nothing much happened, and, maybe some little things were planted for us to maybe later on get the build up of that storyline, but just going through the moments where they slowly bring in new information and all of that. So we had a lot of episodes like that, but to get a week where the episodes have been really informative, really good when it comes to the acting and the drama, and having not just a few characters in the episode, but having a lot of characters, and we're constantly going back from scenes with storylines that we've been wanting, to see how they end, and we're getting closer and closer to, maybe them, either ending or taking another turn and going, into another direction, or, having another layer of the storyline. So we've been getting a lot of that this week. And I have been enjoying this week's episodes of Beyond the Gates. Let me know how you feel about these episodes this week. I can't wait to see how they close the week, up on Friday, because we've had so many great episodes this week. I hope they end, on a high note as well. So that's pretty much all I have to say for this episode recap. Thanks for watching. Like, comment, and subscribe, and I will talk to you later.